If you've been driving the same way for decades and nothing has gone wrong, it's natural to assume you're doing everything right. The roads look the same. The signs haven't changed much. Your habits feel safe and familiar. But in 2026, that sense of familiarity is exactly what's catching experienced drivers off guard. Not because they suddenly became unsafe, but because the system watching them has quietly changed. This isn't a warning meant to scare you, it's a heads up meant to protect you. Because the drivers being affected most right now aren't reckless teenagers. They're careful, responsible adults who assume the rules were still being applied the way they always were. And the reason that assumption no longer holds is what we're going to talk about next. What makes 2026 different isn't a sudden flood of brand new driving laws. It's the way existing rules are now being enforced. For most of your driving life, enforcement depended on human judgment. A police officer had to see you, decide whether what you were doing mattered, and choose whether to act. There was room for discretion, warnings, and explanations. That layer is disappearing. Across the country, states are shifting toward automated enforcement. Cameras monitor speed, phone use, lane behavior, and timing. Databases connect citations directly to DMV records and insurance companies. Violations are logged automatically, often without any direct interaction at all. There's no conversation, no explanation, and no, "I'll let you off with a warning this time." And because driving rules still vary from state to state, something that's acceptable where you live can become a violation the moment you cross a state line. Many drivers only learn this after a notice arrives in the mail, or their insurance rate quietly jumps, and that's why this matters now. The most common enforcement change catching drivers in 2026 doesn't involve speeding or alcohol. It involves distracted driving, and specifically how it's defined and enforced. For years, many states treated phone use as a secondary issue. An officer needed another reason to stop you first. That protection is fading. More states are treating phone use as a primary offense, meaning the phone alone is enough. And the definition of use has expanded. It's no longer just texting while driving. Holding your phone to check directions, scrolling a playlist while stopped at a red light, tapping the screen to dismiss a notification, even resting a glowing phone on your lap can now qualify. This is where experienced drivers get caught unintentionally. For decades, a red light felt like a pause. You weren't moving, so it didn't feel like driving. The law no longer sees it that way. If you're in the driver's seat with the car in gear or ready to move, you're considered actively operating the vehicle. First-time fines are no longer symbolic. In many areas, they're hundreds of dollars, and the bigger cost comes later when insurance companies treat distracted driving as a high-risk behavior. Premiums can rise for years from a single citation. The simplest protection is habit change. Keep the phone out of your hands entirely. Use voice controls or a basic dashboard mount. Treat every stop as active driving. These small adjustments eliminate most of the risk, and this is only the beginning. The next shift removes officers from the equation almost entirely. Automated enforcement has entered a new phase. Speed cameras are no longer limited to a few obvious intersections. They're now paired with AI, radar, and timing systems, especially in construction and school zones. These systems don't measure your speed at one moment. They track you continuously. If workers are present in a construction zone and you exceed the posted limit, even briefly, the system records it. There's no shoulder stop, no explanation, just a citation mailed later. What trips up experienced drivers is familiarity. You've driven through that zone dozens of times before when nothing was happening. But activation now depends on timing, not memory. One worker behind a barrier can trigger enforcement. School zone cameras operate the same way. They turn on based on schedules, not whether children are visible. If the time window is active, the lower speed limit applies immediately. Appeals rarely succeed because the system simply checks whether the limit was exceeded. Violations can stack silently, and insurance companies may see patterns long before you do. The safest approach is to treat these zones as absolute. When you see the sign, you match the number exactly. Navigation alerts can help, but awareness is your real protection. And this leads directly into a change that shrinks the margin for error even further. For most of their lives, American drivers trusted one number when it came to alcohol. Stay under 0.08 and you were considered legally sober. That assumption is no longer safe. Several states are moving toward lower thresholds, inspired by places that already made the change and saw crash rates drop. In practice, this means a blood alcohol level that doesn't feel impairing can still cross the legal line. A single drink with dinner, a glass of wine at a gathering, something that once felt routine, can now put you at risk. This matters more with age. Metabolism slows, medications interact, and alcohol stays in the system longer. The penalties haven't softened just because the limit is lower. License suspension, fines, mandatory programs, and insurance consequences remain severe. The law no longer cares whether you felt fine. It only cares about the number. The safest rule in 2026 is simple. If you plan to drink at all, don't drive. Arrange a ride before the first sip. It's the only approach that removes uncertainty. And if staying ahead of changes like this matters to you, staying informed is becoming as important as driving carefully. Financial consequences are also expanding in quieter ways. One example is electric vehicles. As more drivers moved away from gas, states began losing fuel tax revenue that funds road maintenance. Their solution has been annual EV road use fees added to registration renewals. In many states, these fees are already active and range from modest to substantial, sometimes increasing automatically each year. For drivers on fixed incomes, the surprise matters more than the fairness debate. Similar experiments are underway with mileage-based charges, where how much you drive affects how much you pay, regardless of fuel type. These costs don't arrive dramatically. They appear on renewal notices buried in paperwork. Reading every line matters now. And beyond fees, some states have expanded penalties that include immediate vehicle impoundment for certain behaviors classified as reckless. What used to result in a ticket can now result in your car being towed on the spot, with storage fees adding up quickly. Enforcement has become more physical, not just financial. There is one area where changes may sound positive for seniors at first. Some states are raising the age for mandatory road tests, recognizing that older drivers as a group are often cautious and experienced. But at the same time, renewal procedures are becoming stricter. In-person visits are required more often. Vision checks and identity verification are emphasized. Missing an in-person requirement can fully invalidate a license once it expires, even if the mistake was unintentional. Digital licenses don't replace this process. In some cases, they make in-person verification more important, not less. The prevention here is simple but critical. Read renewal notices early. If an in-person visit is required, schedule it as soon as you're eligible. Families should talk about this now. Helping parents or grandparents navigate appointments before a lapse creates a crisis. Taken together, all of these changes point to a single reality. In 2026, driving is monitored, data-driven, and automated. Safe drivers can still be penalized if they rely on old assumptions. Awareness is now part of responsible driving. To protect yourself, take 5 steps. Review your state's DMV updates for this year and don't rely on memory. Adjust phone habits so your hands never touch a screen while driving. Treat construction and school zones as exact, not flexible. Plan transportation in advance if alcohol is involved at all. And read every renewal notice carefully, acting early when in-person steps are required. Share this information with family members who drive, especially seniors and new drivers. A few minutes of awareness can prevent fines, protect insurance rates, and preserve independence. Driving carefully still matters, but in 2026, staying informed matters just as much.